you ever wondered what your history textbooks left out? The truth is, schools skip over some of the most fascinating and sometimes shocking stories that shaped our world. Today, we're diving into 10 hidden facts that will completely change how you see human history. The truth about Columbus and the flat Earth. When most people learned about Columbus in school, they heard he bravely sailed across an ocean of believers who thought the world was flat. That narrative is completely false. In reality, scholars in 1492 already knew the Earth was round. The educated world had known this for centuries. Before he was even born, what Columbus actually attempted to prove was that sailors could reach China by traveling west across the ocean instead of going east. He wasn't fighting against flat Earth mythology. He was trying a new trade route that would bring wealth and power to his sponsors. When his ships hit land in the Caribbean, he had no idea he'd stumbled upon an entirely new continent, unknown to European geography. The real kicker? Columbus never even set foot in what would become the United States. His voyages took him to the islands of the Caribbean, yet he remains credited with discovering America. The actual first European to reach American shores was Leif Erikson, a Norse explorer who arrived around the year 1000, roughly 500 years before Columbus. This massive historical inaccuracy has shaped how millions of students understand exploration and discovery. Lincoln's surprising hidden talents. Abraham Lincoln is remembered as the great emancipator who preserved the Union during America's bloodiest conflict. What textbooks rarely mention is that Lincoln was a licensed bartender. Yes, you read that right. In Springfield, Illinois, he co-owned a tavern called Berry and Lincoln before his political career took off. But that's not all. Lincoln was also an accomplished wrestler with a fierce competitive streak. High school records show he was notorious for hurling insults at his opponents, mixing sharp wit with athletic skill. This tough, witty tavern owner evolved into one of history's most important political figures, but schools conveniently skip over these colorful details that humanize this legendary president. The medieval art of extreme eyegao gouging in the early American frontier and rural areas of the 18th and 19th centuries, settlers had their own brutal way of settling disputes. A practice called gouging became shocking to boys. This wasn't just a fist fight. It was an incredibly violent form of wrestling, where opponents actively tried to gouge out each other's eyes. The fact that this horrifying spectacle actually existed and was widespread shows just how different frontier life truly was from what we imagine. Schools gloss over the savage reality of early American life, focusing instead on simplified narratives of pioneers and progress. Isaac Newton's secret obsession with alchemy. Isaac Newton's secret obsession with alchemy. Isaac Newton revolutionized mathematics and physics, laying the foundation for modern science that we still teach today. His laws of motion and gravity shaped how we understand the universe and its fundamental workings. But here's what they don't tell you in school. Newton spent an enormous amount of time pursuing alchemy. He wrote an astounding 169 books on the subject, none of which were published during his lifetime. Alchemy was the pseudoscientific predecessor to chemistry, focused on turning base metals into precious metals and creating an elixir of life that would grant immortality. Newton, one of the greatest minds ever to exist, spent countless hours chasing what we now know was complete nonsense. This contradiction reminds us that even brilliant people can get caught up in magical thinking and pursue ideas that have no basis in reality. It's a humbling reminder that genius doesn't protect us from superstition. The oldest parliament in the world wasn't in Britain. Students learn that the British Parliament is the mother of all parliaments and the oldest representative body in the world. This is flat out wrong. The Icelandic Alþingi holds the true title. Established in 930, the Alþingi was an annual outdoor assembly held about 45 kilometers from modern Reykjavik. Any free man could attend these gatherings, where leaders made laws and dispensed justice. While the Danish monarchy eventually limited its powers in the 14th century, the Alþingi survived and became the supreme authority once again when Iceland gained independence in 1944. For over 1,000 years, this institution has endured as a living testament to ancient democratic principles. Cleopatra's superhuman language skills. Cleopatra's famous as Egypt's most beautiful pharaoh. Cleopatra's superhuman language skills. Cleopatra's famous as Egypt's most beautiful pharaoh, legendary for her dramatic death and romantic affairs. What gets overshadowed is her extraordinary intellectual capacity. During her lifetime, Cleopatra mastered an incredible 12 languages. More impressively, she learned to speak Egyptian, something her Macedonian ancestors never bothered to master. In all their generations of rule, she also learned ancient Greek, ancient Iranian, Parthian, Syriac, Ethiopian, Troglodyte, Hebrew, and Arabic, while most people know her name. Few understand that she was a linguistic genius who actually connected with her subjects by learning their native tongue. Schools reduce her to a historical figure of romance, rather than emphasizing her remarkable intelligence, the violent reality behind Thanksgiving. For generations, American children learned about a peaceful feast between pilgrims and Native Americans, a happy moment of harmony between two peoples. The real story is far darker and more troubling. In 1636, English soldiers blamed the Pequot Indians for a murder and, seeking revenge, launched an attack that killed around 400 Pequot people, including women and children. The governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony then officially proclaimed that day a celebration of Thanksgiving for subduing the Pequots. This horrific massacre became the twisted foundation for what Americans now celebrate as Thanksgiving, a holiday built on genocide and bloodshed rather than peace and cooperation. Hitler had a nephew who fought against Nazi Germany. Adolf Hitler had family complications that textbooks never explore. His half-brother Alois had a son named William Patrick Hitler, born in England in 1911. William spent time in Germany during the 1930s before moving to America in 1939. Most remarkably, in 1944, William appealed to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, asking to join the United States Armed Forces and fight against his notorious uncle. The FBI investigated and deemed his request sincere. Though he never saw combat, William served in the U.S. military until 1947. He eventually changed his name to William Stewart Houston and lived until 1987. This bizarre family connection shows that even history's greatest monsters had complex personal relationships that challenge simple narratives. The longest war nobody even knew was happening. The strangest military conflict in history lasted 335 years without a single casualty. It was a war between Britain and the Isles of Scilly, and both sides simply forgot they were fighting. Around 1651, tensions escalated and war was technically declared. However, neither side ever actually formally ended the conflict or signed a peace treaty. They just sort of forgot about it and moved on with their lives. Fast forward 3 centuries to 1994. Historian Roy Duncan discovered a footnote mentioning this forgotten war. He then invited the Dutch ambassador to Scilly and negotiated a peace treaty that finally, officially ended the war. Centuries of dormant conflict resolved with a friendly diplomatic handshake rather than cannon fire. The Krakatoa eruption that shook the entire world in August of 1883, the volcanic island of Krakatoa in Indonesia erupted in one of the most catastrophic explosions in recorded history. What makes this event particularly stunning is the sheer power of the sound it produced. The explosion was so incredibly loud that it ruptured the eardrums of people standing 40 miles away. The sound waves traveled around the world 4 times and could be heard clearly from 3,000 miles away. To put this in perspective, that's equivalent to standing in New York City and hearing a sound originating in San Francisco. The explosion killed tens of thousands of people through tsunamis and ash. Yet this world-altering event barely appears in most history curricula, overshadowed by wars and political movements that seem more important to textbook writers. Alexander the Great conquered more than 2 million square miles of territory before age 30, creating one of history's largest empires. Yet, after his death, something strange occurred. Scientists now believe Alexander may have been accidentally buried alive. They theorize he suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, a neurological disorder that can create temporary paralysis while leaving the mind fully conscious. And you'll discover that the most interesting stories are always the ones they forgot to teach us.